What's kicking, everybody? We are back for another episode of Pickin' Fights. I'm Keith, joined as always by Tom. Tom, how are you?
Doing good. Happy Sunday to you. And just got to say, Charles Dubronx is back, man. How about the performance by him last night?
Incredible. That was definitely the highlight of the night. We were talking about it throughout the week. You and I are both huge Charles Oliveira fans, but we're also both very big Beneil Dariush fans. So I think we were going to be satisfied with however that fight played out, as long as it was going to be entertaining, and there was no shot that it wasn't going to be entertaining.
The firefight from the beginning to the end, which only took, 4 minutes?
Yeah, I was surprised it ended that early, but that head kick that Charles threw, going into that final sequence with his hands and everything, and then, a little bit of grappling, that head kick, I think, was like the real difference maker, because that caught Beneil and just kind of threw him off, and, you could see he was real wobbled after that. Was really surprised to see it go down like that. I thought it was going to be a long technical battle, but Charles Oliveira is definitely back, and he's got to be next up. I don't know if Dana White confirmed it last night or not, but
I didn't make it up late enough to watch the press conference or anyone break down what their thoughts were. But Charles Oliveira has such an air of confidence about him, both like leading up to the fight, that it's hard to decipher, because sometimes people with that air of confidence, like, you see that and it looks so cringe after the fact if they end up losing. But for him, even when he did lose, it just kind of went. He's got this like coolness about him that I think is really really interesting, and it pulls a lot of people in, and it's really easy to follow and root for. So like, I'm really excited to see him and Islam go back and forth. And it also begs the question then, where does that leave Alexander Volkanovski in terms of his rematch with Islam Makhachev? So a lot of interesting things happening at that 45, 55-pound division coming up, probably mid to later this year.
Yeah, so Volk is fighting in July against Yair.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, that's not too far away. That's only a couple weeks. I guess, you kind of see what kind of performance Volk puts on, and it's got to be you could give Volk an immediate rematch if you really wanted to. It's just that he has that featherweight belt that he couldn't get the immediate rematch. But, it's Charles could wait a little bit. I think being that he lost to Islam the way that he did, and if Volk has just a dominant performance against Yair where he doesn't take a lot of damage, he's probably going to fight at least one or two more times this year. So maybe one more time. You slot him in there next, and, because I think a Charles Volk fight would be incredible. I think that would be such a sick matchup.
Absolutely. Charles and Volk would be, I would be nervous if I was Volkanovski in that regard, because, I mean, I don't know if he's fought anyone who hits quite as hard as Charles Oliveira does. So
Right.
That would be, I mean, and everyone wants to talk about how, actually, I don't know if they say this that much, but I feel like a lot of people talk about Volkanovski being able to hit hard. He is so technical, but they talk about that the fact that he hits hard too, I believe. And, it would be really interesting to see how that plays out at lightweight against the guy who's a big lightweight. I mean, for Volkanovski, going from 45 to 55 to fighting Charles Oliveira, I mean, he's almost like he's tempering into like that fictional 165-pound division where, the guys are just so much bigger. So that is even a step up for him in another aspect of, but at least you would think he would be more comfortable in terms of like having a striking bout that he's looking for. But that would be another really interesting matchup. But I don't know if I would favor him there. Like, as he goes up in weight, the guys get bigger and longer, and that's only more of a disadvantage for him. And I know he's been able to compete with it thus far in his career, but I mean, listen, it only gets more steep of a slope as he gets to like 55, and especially those guys at 55 having that big jump before 70. There's a lot of guys who fight at 55 that are much bigger than the guys who are fighting at 45 would be. So it gets really really difficult of a path forward for Volkanovski as he gets higher. And that starts with, guys like Charles Oliveira.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I think if I'm Vegas, I'm actually going to make that like a pick'em fight, like a -110 across the board. Maybe with Charles as a slight favorite, like a -130. But I don't know. That fight could play out in so many different ways. I don't think that you would see a Volk finish, but I think when it comes to we could break that fight down if it ever actually happens. But
That would be very interesting. I mean, there's so many different things that play into it that happen like outside of the cage. Just looking at the body types of the two fighters in terms of being almost polar opposites. One being a tall, lanky guy who's so big that he has trouble making the weight sometimes. And actually, specifically talking about that, how about him coming in at 154, showing that not only can he make championship weight without a problem, but going 1 pound lower, making a statement and coming out looking good. Like, talk about motivated Charles. So that's another factor that plays in is, because he had issues with weight cuts before. What Charles are we going to get? You know what I mean? Charles at his best is the best in the world, probably.
Yeah.
But, do we always get that Charles? He even says, that Charles that showed up for the Islam fight, isn't the real him, wasn't a good version of him. And that's why he refuses to watch the fight, because that's just not a version of him he wants to remember. Sure, that's all well and good, but how do we know that we're going to not get that Charles when you come to fight Islam Makhachev? And how do we know that we're going to get the Beneil Dariush Charles? We're going to get the Michael Chandler Charles. We're going to get, the Charles that, really lit the world on fire.
Yeah, that's a good point. I do think that this Charles that showed up last night, yeah, he's definitely the best in the world. I think he finishes Islam. If he could finish Beneil last night, because many people have tried to finish Beneil, and he's a tough son of a gun. So I think the guy that fought last night, just the power is there, even more so than before, it seems like. And the weight cut's huge. I think this got his confidence back big time, and I think it got the fans' confidence back. It definitely made me confident to bet on him again in the future, because I took Beneil Dariush yesterday. So, it's got me back to never doubting Charles. I had that mentality when he was on his run there, and then I kind of faltered with it yesterday, and I was proven wrong. So never doubt Charles. He slips up and he comes right back.
Even at that once, that's been the kind of the story of his whole career, right? Is that he's up and down, but he's had a long a long win streak prior to that one loss to Islam Makhachev, and he's definitely a dog in there, and he's definitely climbing his ranks in terms of the best 155er ever, even despite the losses. I know a lot of people are going to claim Khabib just because he doesn't have any losses and he dominated. But I think, the more you fight, the more you learn, but also the more propensity you have to lose and acquire those losses. And the thing about Charles is, he does have those losses, but I think learning from them and showing the mental fortitude to be able to come back from them definitely is an aspect of greatness that we haven't seen with Khabib, but I think definitely has to be admired and thought of, in the consideration of who's the best. Surely some people are going to falter, and Khabib never faltered, but he only fought 29 times. I think really the last 4 or 5 were of really good quality opponents. A lot of early wins in his career were, I believe, 2-round fights, and I think there were also a lot of sketchy opponents in there. So not discrediting anything about the 29-0, but when you go and you look at it and you look at the level of competition over the length of time, surely Charles Oliveira has been fighting better competition for longer. And the longer you do that, the more likely it is that you are going to get a loss and you're going to get burned, especially when you have such an entertaining styles like Charles. So because of the vast differences in the two guys' careers, I think you have to consider the amount of adversity that Charles Oliveira had to overcome in order to get where he is as another feather in his cap and another talking point to, maybe why he could be the greatest, just because, you don't have that necessarily with Khabib because he didn't fight that great of competition for that long. So it's a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, it is kind of poetic too, because Charles, being up and down in his career, it's exactly how the majority of his fights play out too, where he gets rocked early and he's on his back, and anybody that bet on him or any huge Charles Oliveira fans are shaking at that point, getting stressed out, which I have done numerous times when Charles Oliveira is fighting.
Not last night.
No, I was gonna say it's so rare that he has a dominant performance the way that he did last night. Even though Justin Gaethje was an early, a first round finish for him, he still was dropped 3 times in that fight. He still was on his back quite a few times, and it's just poetic because his career plays out the same way that his fights do. And the guy speaks English now, which is awesome.
That was another. How about that as a surprise at the end?
another mythical fighter in the UFC lore is English speaking Charles. Yeah, and that's huge for his marketing. And that was a big thing that Islam kept saying to him, because Islam Makhachev is a douchebag. He kept saying, "You don't even speak English. You don't speak English." Well, now he speaks English, so that's just another feather in his cap. You know, I think the way that I would like it to play out is Charles Oliveira wins the belt against Islam, and then just goes on another tear, lights the world on fire again. Is speaking English the whole time, so it makes him that much more marketable and that much more fun, because he is a fun guy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's just hard to listen to a translator speak all the time. But, you know, once he bridges that gap and he can tell us in his own words exactly what he's thinking and feeling in the moment, because he's got some great quotes. You know, who is the champion? The champion has a name. Hearing him say it in English last night, goosebumps. I can't wait. All right, so you ready to jump into this? Well, one more thing we could mention, I guess Amanda Nunes is done. She retired, so congratulations.
You sound more excited than I've ever heard you, Keith.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I think that division, which is the heaviest. I'm so bad at remembering the names of the women's divisions. I guess it's women's bantamweight. Right?
Yeah. What was she? No, she was bantamweight and featherweight, right?
Right. 155 for what? She was
35 and 45, and then
the 45 division is done without Amanda Nunes, and that just me not even knowing the division really. I mean, that kind of speaks to me as a women's MMA casual, I suppose. Even though I've had some great women's MMA picks in the past, but it's just not like a marquee division. There's really no big names. So I don't know. Maybe the division retires with Amanda Nunes.
I think one of them will. She was the champion of what was it, 45, and she was the only person in that division. So that's gone. And then we'll see what happens at 35. You have still some contenders at 25 and 15 and throughout women's MMA. But I feel like there's extremely few women's MMA fights that you actually look forward to. It's a handful of fighters, and even at that, I think Amanda Nunes, because of her greatness, was probably one of them that would be one of the bigger draws in the sport. So with her retirement, you could say it makes way for someone else to take her place. But I also think it's probably going to be more of a hit to women's MMA than if any single male fighter retired, because it's just. And I don't know what it is, but just women's MMA does not catch on. I don't know if it's because maybe the stakes aren't as high. The propensity for knockouts are not as often.
No.
So I'm not sure what it is, but I think Amanda Nunes retiring and her being one of the bigger draws to the sport is not good for the overall women's MMA in general and the popularity.
I have an idea on how to save women's MMA, or at least in the UFC, and draw more eyes. You get a super heavyweight division for the women, and you just get like fucking 200-pound, like big women just throwing bombs at each other for like 30 seconds until they gas out. But I think that might be a draw. You could like even do, like the 600-pound sisters from the TLC show.
What you're pitching is women's sumo boxing, right?
Yeah, like female butter beans everywhere.
Right, gotcha. Okay, I'm guarantee you that that's already done in Russia multiple times over.
Well, the slap show was done in Russia first.
Yeah, apparently it was around here too. It was around, it was in the United States for a little bit, and then Dana White picked it up and is just putting the entire weight of the UFC behind it, and clearly there's no market for it. And he keeps lying as if people can't do their own research when he says like, "Oh, this thing is trending bigger than the NFL, basketball, whatever combined." First of all, he throws around trending like it's a word that everyone knows and knows what it means. Nobody has any idea what you mean by this thing is trending bigger. And then number two, there's just no way that the numbers support that the slap fight league is in any way comparable in size or popularity to the NFL, NBA, MLB, and the NHL, let alone combined.
Yeah, he's got to be talking about just like,
if you're going to lie, make it a believable lie.
Right. Right. I think he mentioned that he was talking about how that's like all the numbers across social, like the views on like the little.
Someone's lying to him. Someone's not reading that right.
What?
someone's lying to him, or it's not being read correct. There's no way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there was maybe like a week or two when they probably popped off and went super viral, like when it first came about. And I don't see many of that on my feed anymore.
Yeah, if he had lied and said, "Hey, we're trending bigger than the NHL," or "We are catching on faster than any sports league," I would say, okay, maybe. But saying that you're bigger across all socials than all of those combined, it's like such an astronomical lie. It's such a page out of Trump's book. Actually, now that I think about it, just let me make it as big of a lie as possible, and then like people will like find it endearing, as you know what I mean? Like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You almost have to wonder if he's being sarcastic when he says that. It's such a big lie.
No, I don't think so. I think he's being very serious because he's had a lot of projects fail in the past. Like he had like a surfing TV show at one point that was ass and was canceled within like 3 episodes. Like it was like another like reality TV competition style show. I think everything that he's done outside the UFC, like getting involved in the UFC was probably the best decision that he's ever made in his life. And, it speaks to his acumen as a businessman. Like he's definitely out there trying to get involved in different things and has successful businesses. But I think when it comes to TV and TV shows like that, he's just not good at it. The UFC, he kind of,
he's got the Ultimate Fighter and he's got looking for a fight, but the Ultimate Fighter has turned into something that's just not even enjoyable to watch because half the time you're just learning the backstory of these fighters that like, it's like what they do for The Bachelor or The Bachelorette.
Right.
But they wait and they do that when it's like down to like 3 or 4 girls who like could be it. You know what I mean? Then they go into their backstories deeply. These guys, they're doing it to everyone in the house, and then the guys lose round 1, and then it's like, oh well, like why did I just learn about this guy? So and it didn't always used to be like that. The first episode, everybody fought everybody, and that's how they assess skill. So like I think the UFC, I don't know why. Or if it's out of Dana White's hands, or if it ever was in Dana White's hands, or I really don't know what's going on. But the Ultimate Fighter, even with McGregor and Chandler on there, for the 6 minutes that you're going to get of the back and forth between those guys, it's like, why am I sitting through an hour of this show? I'm learning about fighters that I'm going to forget right about. They're going to either lose their fight, they're going to win a fight, then they're going to lose a fight. And then the winner of the Ultimate Fighter gets in, but then so does like a handful of the guys who were on the season before. So what's the reason to win? Like, none of it really makes sense, and it really needs to be saved because I love the concept of it. It used to be great, but like just add that potentially to the list of Dana White failed endeavors is what tough is turning into.
Yeah, it should mean something, and I think it's funny too. You're like talking about The Bachelor, and last week it was the Van Pumps. You're a big reality TV show guy. But
I know a lot of people that watch a lot of shows, and I try to be very well spoken, and I try to understand everything that's going on so that I can relate to the most amount of people.
Yeah, I mean, The Bachelor is a pretty easy concept to understand, but and it makes sense. I mean, take a page out of their playbook. But yeah, the Ultimate Fighter should mean something. I think that's what it comes down to. Like right now, it's just a television appearance to build hype up for the McGregor Chandler fight. That's literally all it serves as. And out of the last couple of seasons, the only one that I can distinctly remember is Brian Ortega versus Volk.
But even there, the thing I liked about that is they showed a little bit more. They showed more pranks, and so far there's been like very little. I mean, I don't know if that's a byproduct of Conor McGregor maybe not being available or what, but like it's just. If it's even supposed to serve as a hype thing before their fight, I mean, it's not really doing that because it's only showing about 7 minutes of interaction. Like, come on, like show like Michael Chandler and McGregor going back and forth at it for 20, a third of the episode. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that would really build hype. But it just seems like it's sputtering right now. Or that the UFC is almost in like. They're just like a plug and play mode. They're just asleep at the wheel, and it doesn't seem like there's any actual effort behind it. And you remember when big fights used to have like world tours? Like there used to be press conferences all over the world to promote the fight. Like it used to feel like it was an event that was happening. Like, oh my God, this only happens once every couple of years. There hasn't been a big fight promotion that went all over the world that everybody had their eyes into, that everybody was talking about in a long time. The UFC puts on so many fights a year, and maybe that model is better for them to put on more instead of but you would think 2 or 3 fights a year, maybe even if it's only one, they would want to promote the shit out of. Whether that's going to be an Izzy fight, you would certainly imagine it would be a Conor McGregor fight. Like if it's his return fight, why would you? And it's against a guy like Michael Chandler, who is going to jaw back with him on the mic. Why would you not go to multiple locations, do press conferences, get your own content instead of just relying on? Does it cost too much? Like I just don't know what the deal is, because it seemed like that created such an environment and a hype and mystique around a fight, and they just don't do it anymore. I don't know if it just hasn't been done since COVID or what, but it's frustrating.
Yeah, I don't know if we have those level of fights at the moment. Like there are fights to get excited for, but I don't know if there's anything to get that excited for. I think it's like Volk, unfortunately, like he's decent on the microphone. So while he would be a guy that, career-wise you could prop up there and have him be that guy, world tour every now and then, especially going up for a double champ. You have him and Islam on the microphone. Their press conference is very lackluster. Charles
and Islam.
Yeah, Charles and Islam could have been. But
needs the
you have a guy that needs a translator, and you have a guy that speaks broken English. Like that's
okay. So, but you have McGregor, Chandler. I mean, you had Jones, Cyril Gane. Cyril Gane's maybe not the best guy you were looking for.
I think, yeah, Jones, Cyril Gane, yeah, but you wouldn't fly Jones around the world. And then when it comes to McGregor, Chandler, McGregor was going around the world for world tours, and he was double champ and going up for belts and everything. And it's like this fight, in a way, it kind of feels like the Cowboy fight, where it's just like the return, and maybe he builds up from here, maybe he doesn't. But I feel like it's got to mean something for them to take it on a world tour. And I don't know if Conor McGregor just coming back is enough to validate a world tour, and I don't think he's reliable enough to do a world tour.
Yeah, I see what you mean. But in summations, I still want, my fear is that the UFC doesn't do that because they're not seeing the value coming back from it.
Yeah, probably.
And they're kind of going, same reason why they're still doing fights in the Apex is that they're seeing it's like doing a cost benefit analysis instead of putting out the best product possible, and that's really what my fear is, looking at Tough and putting, all of these stories out there, seeing what sticks, and then having that person blow up. That's a better cost benefit analysis than doing a show that's going to be super entertaining but potentially risky because of, it may interfere with ESPN or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like when business bleeds into it, I feel like you definitely have a diminished product. And I know it's not revolutionary for me to say, but it's unfortunate. And I think that we're seeing that more and more with the UFC as it gets bigger.
Yeah, I think the number one thing that the UFC should do is like first and foremost is stop raising the price of their pay-per-views. It's getting fucking ridiculous. You have to pay $80.
I don't think the UFC is doing that. I think that's Disney. I think that's ESPN.
Well, I'd hope that the UFC, or I don't even know if the UFC really gives a shit, but it's just getting kind of ridiculous. It's like every 6 months it goes up another $10. Mm-hmm. And between, UFC, like your Disney Plus membership or your ESPN Plus, the Fight Pass, and now you're paying for all the pay-per-views, and it gets to be expensive. It's like you're looking at a couple $1,000 plus maybe for the year. It's a little absurd. That's
especially if you're buying every pay-per-view.
Right. When pay-per-views were like $50-$60, but there was only a few that you really needed to watch every year, that was one thing, but now it's just getting fucking crazy.
Well, and it's going to be harder for them to gloat about pay-per-view numbers and sales at a higher price point.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
if you want to say we did 3 million pay-per-view buys. Well, you're not doing 3 million at $75. You could do 3 million at $50, maybe $45, probably for sure, depending on the fight.
Right.
But at that higher price point, you're sacrificing buys. And again, business-wise, maybe you sacrifice 100,000 buys, but you make $200,000 or whatever it ends up being, and the money ends up being more at the higher price point, and that's where business is bleeding in. But you're getting a diminished product, and it's sad to see. And I wonder if that's going to change. If we're going to see that change.
Yeah, time will tell. All right, you want to jump into this card now?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do it. All right, so kicking it off as we always do, got some prelim notables. I like a guy by the name of Zhalgas Zhumagulov. I like to call him Zuglis. It's funny. He is on a 3-fight losing streak, but I do have him, as pretty close to a lock this week. The guy's been ready to fight for a couple of weeks. Was having visa issues. Which card was he supposed to come in on? It was not too long ago, maybe last week or 2 weeks ago. Canceled bout against Rafael Esteban. Oh, and Nate Manes. Yeah, he's had a couple of canceled fights pretty recently, but and he's sporting that Patty Pimblett haircut too. Very funny. But Zhalgas Zhumagulov got a lot of good experience in the UFC. He's fought some pretty decent names. Last couple of fights alone: Charles Johnson, Jeff Molina, Manel Cap, Jerome Rivera, and Amir Albazi, who is that lost his age very well. Even though I think that fight was a robbery, but regardless, fighting Felipe Boons coming out of the LFA, making his UFC debut. Guys making their UFC debut. Not super great. Who was it last night though? Last minute fight, UFC. Urseg. Urseg put on a great debut last night against David Dvorak. That was incredible.
Right.
I'm still gonna roll with Zhalgas. Guy's been ready. He's got the experience fighting a guy on his debut. He's got good hands, this cat Felipe, but I like the experience coming out of Zhalgas, and he's got to get back on with a win. 4 fights, 4 losses in a row. It's kind of hard to keep the guy around at that point. But yeah, I'm rolling with Zhumagulov. What do you got, Tom?
2 of them being split decisions, coming in with the haircut before the fight that got pulled out for him. I think that was the card that we were going to be at, or that we were at. Was the Sterling versus Cejudo card.
Oh shit!
So it's good for him getting back on a pay-per-view. I agree with you. I think Zhalgas is going to come in there super motivated against the guy who's going to be making his debut, and put together. He's been training for a while now, so he hasn't been pulling out. He's had some bad luck, so I think he's going to go out there and put on a good performance. His kind of UFC career, at least this section of it, depends on it. I'm going to go with Modestas Bukauskas getting the win over Zach Pauga. Zach Pauga is a guy who I believe was on The Ultimate Fighter. Speaking of, he just wasn't he wasn't that convincing of his UFC caliber talent. He's 35 years old, so he's a little bit older. I know this is the light heavyweight division, so you can get up there in age and you can start a little bit longer. You have a little bit longer in your career to make a name for yourself. But I think Zach Pauga, I don't think he's particularly fast. I don't think he hits particularly hard. He's a guy that tries to overwhelm with volume, and at the end of the day, against better quality opponents who are in a lot better of physical shape, I think he's going to have a harder time overwhelming them with the volume. I think he can overwhelm maybe the bottom of the barrel of the UFC and other promotions, but I think once you get into a better quality opponent, he's going to have some severe difficulty, especially a guy who's going to have a reach advantage on him, a height advantage, a frame advantage, an athleticism advantage, and an age advantage on him, like a guy like Modestas Bukauskas, who's on a 3-fight winning streak himself. Like I said, he's 6'3", 78 inches of reach versus Zach Pauga's 76, so he's got that 2 inches. Now, I know that Zach Pauga fights at Elevation Fight Team, so he's going to have some decent cardio that really hasn't been shown up until this point. He definitely gets tired at the later point in the fights. He slows down even more than when he is at the beginning of the fight. And I know that I'm kind of ripping him a new one, and his nickname, The Ripper, kind of goes together a little bit, but I just don't think his level of talent and what he's bringing is going to be able to withstand Modestas Bukauskas, who's more technical of a fighter. Like I said, 3-fight win streak against UFC caliber, guy Tyson Pedro. Tyson Pedro is out there in Australia, and I think he had a really interesting career where he was knocking people out and was thought to be the next big thing. He got injured. He was out for a period of time. He came back, had a couple good fights, and then he ran into Modestas Bukauskas and lost. So I think for Modestas, he's getting his mojo back. I believe he was in the UFC before that. He got a bad decision. Well, not a bad decision, but he lost a split decision to Michael Oleksiejczuk, which aged pretty well. So for all of those reasons, I'm going to go with Modestas Bukauskas getting the win over Zach Pauga. And I feel really good about that. It's the first fight on the card, so leading us off. What do you think about that, Keith? I know it was a little long-winded.
I like that. I like that pick a lot. Zach Pauga he really hasn't done anything to impress. I can't remember what season of The Ultimate Fighter he was on, but I remember it being like pretty mediocre. Funny that we were just talking about The Ultimate Fighter falling off. Yeah, not. I like Modestus Bukauskas. I like the pick. You got any more?
The only other one I wanted to highlight here is Jimmy Flick coming back against Alessandro Costa. This is one where I'm going to be going with Costa on, and I feel pretty confident with it. Jimmy Flick is a guy who he was out for a long time. You look at his last win was 2 years and 5 months ago. He actually retired after that against Cody Durden. That was a fight that he was losing, and he just got a flying triangle kind of and caught Cody Durden and Cody Durden tapped. So that wasn't a great performance by Jimmy Flick. He was always a guy that is pretty wild. He doesn't have great striking. He does have some impressive jiu-jitsu that he can pull off at crazy times. He's good in the scrambles, but I think against a guy like Alessandro Costa, who has good grappling and has much better striking, I think Jimmy Flick is not going to have a path to victory. I think Costa is going to do a good job at keeping himself safe against some of the craziness that Jimmy Flick is going to throw at him. I remember Jimmy the Brick Flick, he came back against Charles Johnson, and he just really didn't look good. He chalked that up to potentially being ring rust, but I also feel like I remember him leaving that ring and not being as confident in his abilities. I could be misremembering, but either way, I just think Jimmy Flick, at this point in his career, 32 years old, after 2.5 years off, coming off of a loss that wasn't that long ago, 3 months. And I understand he wants to get right back in there, but it was a ground and pound loss where he took a bunch of shots to the head. He's not a guy known for his chin anyway. And his advantage here would be the ground, in which case I don't think he's going to have that large of an advantage. I think the advantage is much smaller for him on the ground, if there even is one, and Costa's going to have it standing up. He's going to have an age advantage. He's going to have a quickness advantage, and the only thing he's not going to have is going to be a little bit smaller, but Costa has a really good gas tank, and we just don't know about Jimmy Flick at this point. So far more question marks for Flick. I'm going with Costa.
Yeah, I like the pick. I mean, I like Jimmy Flick. I like what I like about him is how wild he is, but it's not really beneficial to him. But the guy can be pretty entertaining.
It's interesting for sure.
Yeah, exactly. All righty. I'm good. You got any more?
Nope. Let's head to the main card.
All right, let's do it. All right.
Main card opener.
Yeah, I like
Dalby.
I like this fight. I like this fight a lot. I like Muslim Salikhov and I like Nicolas Dalby. Nicolas Dalby's kind of weird, and the way that I always remember the guy is like his weird breathing exercises that he does while he's fighting. The one that sticks out to me the most is the one against Tim Means. Like he really like the way that he breathes. It looks like he's constantly exhausted. He takes like these sharp, deep breaths in through his mouth, and deep into his stomach. Tom and I were talking about that before about like the stomach breathing that a lot of fighters do, but his is so exaggerated and over the top. It just looks like he's exhausted the entire time he's fighting.
Freedom talks about that. Hey, your guy Michael Chandler does that.
Yeah, but you'll see it again this week. Nick Dalby just does it so over the top. Like he's. I wish my camera was on because I don't even know if I could do it justice. Just Nick Dalby breathes crazy. And it's like the most noticeable thing about the fight. And then you have on the other end, Muslim Salikhov, great striker, great stand-up fighter. Both of these guys are just willing to, throw and they're both very creative. It's going to be very entertaining. I just think when it comes down to it, that Muslim Salikhov has the experience. He's fought much better competition. He's got a little bit more power behind his hands than Nick Dalby. Uses his legs a lot better than Nick Dalby, I think, as well. So I'm going to roll with Muslim Salikhov. I think it's going to be a decision fight, and I think both of these guys are just going to be, up in each other's faces for a good chunk of it. Bless you.
I tried to hit the mute button. I didn't quite get there. Damn.
It's okay. You were close. You're human, Tom. It doesn't matter. We all sneeze. But I think it's just going to be like a fun 3-round stand-up fight. Probably decision victory for Muslim Salikhov after controlling the distance and picking his shots a little bit better. And Nick Dalby just looking like he's exhausted the whole time, which may or may not play a factor in with the judges. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to go with Muslim Salikhov. I think he's just a little bit more technical. I think he, even though he's going to have a 4-inch reach disadvantage in this fight, I think he has like really long legs. And he uses his legs well. I think Muslim Salikhov is a guy who's going to understand the distance just a little bit better. And then should it get into more of a like a grappling fight up against the fence. I think Salikhov is going to be just a little bit stronger in those positions. Being from Russia, having a strong grappling base in that regard. I think he's going to go out there and he's going to get it done. But Nicolas Dalby, like you said, is a guy who coming in here at plus 170 as a slight underdog. I feel like this fight is going to be a little bit closer than what that line would have you suggest. I would have this a little bit closer to a pick'em, to be honest with you, just because I don't think either of the guy is going to get a finish over the other. I think it's going to go to the decision, and that's always at this point like so up in the air, because you can have a fight that's going to be like semi-close, like this one, and it can go, it come down to one judge, and one judge getting one round wrong. You know what I mean? One judge on one round could be enough to flip an entire fight for somebody else. So with that level of variability in judging, it's just so hard to be confident in these decisions between close stand-up fighters without much put-away power. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. Well, all right, next one up then. Nicolas Motta versus Manuel Torres. I am rolling with Manuel Torres. Nick Motta, the first thing that just stands out to me about him is his last loss 2 fights ago was to Jim Miller. And while Jim Miller, obviously, he's got records upon records, holds, the most wins in the UFC now or something, and the most fights. But if you're a young up-and-coming fighter, I don't think that you can justify a loss to Jim Miller. And Manuel Torres, like getting finished by Jim Miller, especially in the way that Motta did. Jim Miller clearly has hands, but you can't be getting caught by a guy like Jim Miller and expect to win against a guy like Manuel Torres, who, while he is new to the UFC, he had a big flash knockout over Frank Camacho last year. Kind of like made a statement. It was his UFC debut. Obviously, Frank Camacho, not a big name, but the kid on his debut, you got to appreciate that. That alone is an accomplishment in today's world, where we speak about it all the time. Fighters making their debut struggle. So I fully expect Manuel Torres, a guy with like a lot of power behind his hands, a lot of really close. He's really good at throwing hooks, whether it be close, or at a distance. But he's got a really tight hook that he throws really well up close. Uses legs really well. Just great all around kickboxer. And then when he takes it to the ground, the submission game is crazy. He's very intelligent about it. Like whether he drops his opponent or takes him down, his first move is not to posture up and try and beat the snot out of him. It's instantly just looking for limb or neck, something to lock up. And that's what it looks like he's gotten the majority of his pre-UFC wins. I guess basically is like a relatively new pro, but he's a finishing machine. And I think I don't want to say he's going to finish Motta this week. Well, yeah, I will say it. I think Manuel Torres is going to, just have another statement victory, just slowly working his way up here and becoming more and more of a draw. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I hear everything you're saying, and I think you said a lot of what are the keys to breaking this fight down. You have Manuel Torres to go out there and he has put away power. Like you said, knocking out Frank Camacho in his UFC debut, something that we typically see guys struggle during. Also, his fight on the Contender Series, getting that done via finish. And the Nicolas Motta, he got finished by Jim Miller with the right hook. That's something that, even though it was a year and 3 months ago at the time of this fight, it is something that you have to be concerned about, guys getting finished and then coming back and then, having that, whether that's a psychological effect or an actual physical effect on their chin that lingers afterwards. When you have a guy who's been finished fairly recently and shown an ability to be finished in the past by, a guy like, Jim Miller is a great fighter, definitely a UFC legend, can still put it on you, but it's not like his power is where it once was. It's not like it's a younger Jim Miller. We're still talking about a guy who's approaching his 40s that, Nick Motta is getting finished when he's a guy at the time in his 20s. He's also going to have a reach disadvantage here. So I think, you said everything. I think Manuel Torres is going to go out there and he's going to get it done. I think he's going to have a speed advantage, reach advantage, and power advantage. For a guy like Nicolas Motta that can get hit, I think that's definitely a problem.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, so we're on the same page then?
Yes, sir.
All right, nice. Next up, Pat Sabatini versus Lucas Almeida. I'm going to roll with Pat Sabatini. I think the grappling is the big difference maker here. he got knocked out by Damon Jackson because Pat Sabatini is not all put together with his hands. But just when it comes to the ground game, it's very complete. And I think it's going to be a 3-round wrestling jiu-jitsu clinic out of Pat Sabatini with Lucas Almeida trying to throw a lot of strikes, on his feet, but ultimately just being taken down and out wrestled. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I think Pat Sabatini is going to go out there and get this one done. This is a matchup of two guys who, have very similar skill sets. Lucas Almeida is good on the ground. He also has a decent striking game. You look at some of his wins. The win over Bruno Tavares 4.5 years ago. Nico Cuccio, that's a fun name to say. Cuccio, flying knee victory over in Jungle Fight. We see that promotion pop up from time to time. He has the loss to Daniel Zellhuber via decision on the Contender Series. The Daniel Zellhuber guy we saw inside of the UFC for a little bit there. Went back to Jungle Fight, got a submission over there, and then he knocked out Mike Trizano in his UFC debut. So another guy who's going out and getting a win, not just a win, but a knockout in his UFC debut. So that's coming in here for Lucas Almeida. He's a guy who can get it done a variety of different ways. He's got good striking. He's got, like I said, the good knees, and also a good ground game. But for a guy like Pat Sabatini, who was on, I believe it's at least a 4 fight. Let's go see how much of a win streak it was before that. But for Pat Sabatini, who was on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fight win streak, and then he ran into Damon Jackson, that was the fight where I believe it was his sister, or he had a very close family member who had passed away. He came into that with a lot of emotion and just kind of stunned Pat Sabatini within the first minute of the fight. So it wasn't like Pat was, getting beaten down and, was showing, a weakness at all. He just went in there and got stunned. Now, we talked about it in the last fight about the effect that could potentially have on people. I don't know if that's going to, we don't really know how Pat Sabatini is going to be affected by being starched like that. But at 32 years old, you would hope that he's going to be able to kind of just shake that one off as potentially a fluke. He's got very good grappling. His striking has been improving. And I think, he's going to go out here and I think, he's going to have the combination of skills to be able to ward off a potential submission from Lucas Almeida and any potential finishing. I think that he's going to go out there and he's going to get it done. But I do think that Lucas Almeida is a very good opponent for him. And I think this one's probably going to go to decision with Pat Sabatini winning the majority of the positions and the striking exchanges.
Yeah.
Or not the striking exchanges, the grappling exchanges. And I think, because that's a strong point in both of their games, I think we're going to see a little bit of it.
Yeah, I agree. What do you got for the next fight? You want to kick this one off? Christian Leroy Duncan versus Armen Petrosyan.
Yeah, this is an interesting fight. This one almost definitely is going to be a stand-up fight. You have Armen Petrosyan, a guy in the UFC who potentially has some of the worst takedown defense of any UFC fighter I've seen. Now, he's traditionally a stand-up guy. He's got really good quick kicks. He throws the question mark kicks. He likes to throw that front leg out there and stab at the stomach of guys. He also follows up with really good right hands, especially the right straight, sometimes even the hooks behind those leg kicks. He is a very entertaining fighter to watch, but when it comes to the UFC and MMA, he's had a little bit of struggles. He has a loss outside of the UFC here. But when we look against Kyle Barallo, who's a good opponent, he wasn't able to keep up when it came to the grappling exchanges. He got taken down almost at will by Kyle Barallo. It was a dominant performance by him. Kyle Barallo looked pretty solid on the feet, but Petrosyan was getting a little bit better at those exchanges in that fight. And then we saw Arman Petrosyan come back and have a decisive victory over AJ Dobson. At this point, Armen Petrosyan, we know what we're going to get with him. He doesn't have a ton of power. He does have a lot of skill, and he has the ability and that dexterity with those leg kicks and the speed to land on you. It's just nothing that I've seen at this point against the upper level of competition or even a mid-level of competition in the UFC is going to put people away consistently. He just doesn't have that it factor, that power. He's going to touch you up, but very rarely is he going to be putting people away, it seems like, inside of the UFC. And like I said, went to the split decision with Gregory Rodriguez, which, looks good. Gregory Rodriguez is a great fighter, and I think he just lost recently, but he was on a win streak of his own. So, a lot of wins that aged well. Christian Leroy Duncan is an extremely exciting fighter. He goes out there and he puts people away. He's got a win over Dusko Todorovic. That was a knee injury, but he was laying it on him. And over in Cage Warriors, he's got a string of finishes over here too against some solid competition. Cage Warriors is a good promotion in and of itself. You're going to have a good quality and caliber of opponent over there. I'm really excited for Christian Leroy Duncan back on the train of guys who are winning their UFC debuts and winning them by finishes. I think Christian Leroy Duncan is going to be that guy to go out there and actually beat Armen Petrosyan. Not to mention his 8-inch reach advantage here, 79 to 71, which is going to be really difficult for Armen Petrosyan to get those leg kicks in there when he's going to consistently get a jab to the face, jab to the face, jab to the face, and potentially mess up his vision. And, obviously taking those brain shots, makes it more difficult to think as the fight goes on. And also, if there is going to be any level of grappling in this fight, I think Christian Leroy Duncan probably gets the advantage in that regard as well. So I think he's the faster guy. I think he is definitely going to have the reach advantage. I don't have to think about that one. And I know that he's probably going to have a power advantage here. And then if it comes to grappling in any capacity, he's probably going to have that advantage as well. So for all those reasons, I'm going with CLD, Christian Leroy Duncan.
I like that pick a lot. You basically, I don't know what else to say, to be honest. Yeah, Leroy Duncan, the power is the biggest thing that sets these two men apart. Armen Petrosyan, definitely creative, definitely a great kickboxer. I don't think you're going to see Christian Leroy Duncan take him down. The way that, like, you hit the nail on the head that Armen Petrosyan potentially has the worst takedown defense of all time. But yeah, I think the power is the biggest difference maker. And while I would like Armen Petrosyan to win, I am quite a big fan of him. I love his style on the feet. It's just I don't think he's got this one in the cards. I would like to see him win, and at plus 130, maybe he's like that one dog that will get a victory on the main card. I could kind of see that happening, but I do think it's more likely that CLD wins this fight. All right, so we're on the same page with that one, as we have been with pretty much every other fight on this card. We got to split up somewhere. I don't think it's going to be on this next one.
Not on this one. Not on this one. We can say it together, right? Armen Tsarukyan?
Yeah, Armen Tsarukyan's going to win this fight.
Quick question. How long has that been his nickname?
All
right. I feel like that hasn't been his name. If it has, I've been sleeping on it, but I feel like that hasn't been his nickname.
Bro, and he's the biggest favorite I think I've ever seen. He's minus 1,000.
Minus 1,000. Yeah, I mean, listen, this is a mismatch for him. And I think Typology has him as the 8th lightweight in the worldwide. I don't know how that compares with the UFC in their rankings.
It's
what I can tell you is Joaquim Silva, is nowhere even near the top 20. And, I know that you can't necessarily take these as gospel, but I mean, listen, this is a mismatch. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighter going up against Armen Tsarukyan, who's got some of the best grappling in the UFC. This is a guy, look at him. He's 2-3 over his last 5. He's got, the win against Jesse Ronson in a flying knee, which was pretty good, but Jesse Ronson's not someone of caliber of Armen Tsarukyan. When you get near the top of the division, not even the top of the division, Ricky Glenn and Nasrat Haqparast, so, you're getting finished by, to think that he's not going to go out there and, he's got a win over Jared Gordon, at least, 4.5 years ago. I really don't know how this fight came to be. I think Armen Tsarukyan just wanted someone to fight. And, he wasn't getting anybody, and he wasn't getting any younger at 26 years old. This guy has a lot to prove. He's got big plans. He's going to have a reach advantage. He's going to have a skill advantage. He's going to have a youth advantage. He's going to have a grappling advantage. He's probably going to have a striking advantage too, if we have to bet on it. So, Tsarukyan all day, right?
Yeah. I don't know how you could go any other way. He was supposed to fight Renato Moicano a few weeks ago, or a few months now at this point. That would have been a fun fight. I just think that this is going to be a brutal murder, however Armen Tsarukyan decides to do it. So
I mean, he's got a loss in his second bout ever, then Islam Makhachev,
yeah,
and then a very controversial loss to Mateusz Gamrot, which it was extremely close in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, I had that very close as well. That was a hard one to pick the winner of, but yeah, I don't think it's going to be even close this week. Enough said about that one. Armen Tsarukyan minus 1,000, and for anybody who doesn't know what that is, or just to put it into perspective, minus 1,000 means you have to wager $1,000 to win $100 as a bet. So
10 to 1.
Yeah, so if you have like millions of dollars to bet, go ahead and throw it all on Armen Tsarukyan and get like that little profit back. But
That would be 1 to 10 odds, right?
yeah, I think it's 1 to 100. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think it's 1 to 10.
Okay. Yeah, they
1 to 10. Yeah, because 10 to 1 odds would you would get 10 to your 1, but 1 to 10 is you would get 1 to your 10.
Yeah.
How nuts is that? I could be totally backwards. So if you're watching, I'm totally backwards, and I'm totally backwards. Let us know in the comments, because I would like to know. But I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, main event time. Yeah, Marvin Vettori versus Jared Cannonier. I'm gonna go with Marvin Vettori here. Minus 150 favorite. Anybody that's been watching for a while knows I'm a big fan of Marvin Vettori. He's had a couple of fun fights, and he was pursuing Izzy for a while there, like really closely. Was trying to, be one of those guys in this middleweight division that's hanging around the belt. He still is like up in that range. Had a great fight last time around against Roman Dolidze. Lost by decision to Robert Whittaker. Rob Whittaker is a tough guy to beat. I didn't think Marvin Vettori necessarily had the skill set for that. Great fight against Paulo Costa. Ate a lot of damage in that fight and just kept marching forward the whole time. And I think that that's one of the things that's going to help Marvin Vettori against Jared Cannonier is just his chin. He's got such a great chin. The guy, I mean, when we start calling him the Italian zombie, but I think the takedowns are going to be there for Marvin Vettori against Jared Cannonier this week. And I think when it comes to striking, he's a lot more intelligent. Eats one, gives two. He doesn't have a lot of power behind his hands the way that Cannonier does, but Marvin Vettori doesn't really get finished. And I feel like that's, even though Jared Cannonier just won a decision against Sean Strickland, I think that he needs to finish Marvin Vettori. I don't think that he can outstrike Marvin Vettori. Marvin Vettori is a lot more technical and brutish than Sean Strickland is. Sean Strickland is just going to walk you down and just throw a 1-2 at you for, say it's a 5-round fight, 3, total like time of that fight, like 15 minutes total is just going to be Sean Strickland walking you down and throwing a 1-2. Marvin Vettori, way more intelligent, way more technical, better ground game. The only thing that Jared Cannonier has over him is the power, I think. And, Marvin Vettori doesn't get finished. So I'm going to go with Marvin Vettori at minus 150 and sweeten it up by Marvin Vettori to win by a decision. That'll probably be like still minus 100 or something, or like minus 110. But I think that's a very worthwhile bet. And that's probably what I'll stake, my highest wager on this week.
I think that'll probably be minus 145 because I don't see Marvin Vettori going down there and getting the finish. When was Marvin Vettori's last finish? No. Certainly not in his last 5, not even Kevin Holland, who is much smaller than him.
Yeah.
Listen, at the end of the day, I think it was interesting that you brought up the Sean Strickland fight in comparison to Marvin Vettori, because I think it's going to be somewhat of a similar fight in the fact that Marvin Vettori and Sean Strickland don't fight that different from each other, and they actually do train with each other. I think that, the fact that they both kind of walk forward, they lead behind, their jabs and their straights, and they don't throw a ton of craziness at you. They throw a lot of standard orthodox boxing style punches with a couple leg kicks behind it. And the both of them are willing to take one in exchange to give one. In Marvin Vettori's case, give 2 or 3. Same thing actually with Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland comes forward. He has his hands here, so it's hard to get through to him. He'll let you throw on him so he can unleash 2. They fight very similar, and I guess that's why they're starting to train together. Marvin Vettori, the reach disadvantage in this fight doesn't scare me. I think the build-wise, both of them are pretty big dudes. Of course, Jared Cannonier is probably going to be the biggest dude in 85, being the fact that he's a former heavyweight. So when it comes to just muscle, Jared Cannonier is always going to have that. But Marvin Vettori, another gigantic guy for the division. These guys have this losses to the exact same two opponents, Izzy Adesanya and Robert Whittaker. I think Marvin Vettori at 29 years old is still getting better, where if anything, Jared Cannonier is going to either take a lateral step or be a little bit worse. I don't think we're going to see a better version of him fight to fight, at least not in the way that we're going to potentially see of Marvin Vettori. I like the Marvin Vettori for his hard-headedness, that he actually has in physical attributes and ability to take a shot. He actually also has the ability to be a really, what was I trying to say there? For the amount of hard-headedness that he shows in his fights, he actually goes and he trains that way too with Sean Strickland. He actually pushes himself. So I think him and having that really I don't want to call him grotesque, but the fact that he's just willing to go out there and grind and fight and just put his skills on to the test every single day with guys like Sean Strickland, with guys like Chris Curtis, and I know Chris Curtis didn't have a great showing last night, but I think the way these guys train is perfect for their personalities, and I think they're having a lot of fun with it, which is only going to lead to a better product out there. Marvin Vettori is only getting better, and I think he is going to be a more aggressive, a more durable, and a little bit of a more powerful Sean Strickland. So for Jared Cannonier, going to a very tight decision, winning a split decision with Sean Strickland in his most recent fight, potentially trending on the downward versus a Marvin Vettori who's going to be a better version of Sean Strickland, I think, at this point, and trending on the upwards. Everything's leading me to believe Marvin Vettori. I don't think Jared Cannonier at this point in his career is going to be able to finish Marvin Vettori unless we see something crazy. But Marvin Vettori's got that freaking, brick of a dome. So, I don't see that happening. And I think his volume is going to overwhelm Jared Cannonier. It's a 5-round fight. And honestly, because Marvin Vettori, we've seen him fight in 5-round fights before and, continue to keep up that pressure, even though he looks exhausted, he continues to keep coming at guys. Like Izzy Adesanya, he was never out of those fights. They were close, and the second fight was even closer. I think Marvin Vettori potentially has a chance to, in the later rounds, potentially put Jared Cannonier away if he continues to keep up that really high intensity, moving forward, plotting style, landing big leg kicks and throwing overhands. And, Jared Cannonier just, if he doesn't have the power to put Vettori away, it's not like he's going to win on a volume game. So, he's been pretty tentative as of late. So I think it's a lot of mismatches here for Jared Cannonier. So I see Marvin Vettori, and even minus 150. I would say Marvin Vettori is probably a minus 200, maybe even a little bit more of a favorite in this fight.
Yeah, but you did say that maybe there's an opportunity for Marvin Vettori to finish him. So with him being minus 150, we got to see what that decision line is going to look like. I think that's definitely the most likely outcome, though. That's what I'm going to stake the highest this week, I think. All righty, so you want to do our pick rundown and wrap this thing up?
I'm with you.
All right, let's do it. All right, prelim notables. I'm going to tell you with your pick with Modestas Bukauskas. And then I'm also going to take Zhalgas Zhumagulov over Felipe Bunes. And then for the main card, I'm going with Muslim Salikhov over Nicolas Dalby. Excuse me. I'm going with Manuel Torres over Nicolas Motta. Pat Sabatini over Lucas Almeida. Christian Leroy Duncan over Armen Petrosyan. But I might also sprinkle a little bit on Armen Petrosyan to win by decision because, most likely outcome for Petrosyan is a decision victory. I feel like we have to have one upset on this main card. So maybe that'll be the one. Either that or Lucas Almeida. I think one of those two guys. Armen Tsarukyan, obviously, over Joaquim Silva. And then Marvin Vettori over Jared Cannonier. And especially taking Marvin Vettori by decision over Jared Cannonier. What do you got, Tom?
So I'm going to be doing Modestas Bukauskas. I'm really embarrassed at how similar our picks are going to be. Modestas Bukauskas over Zach Pauga. I'm going to tell you on Zhalgas Zhumagulov over Felipe Bunes. I am going to take Alessandro Costa over Jimmy Flick. I am, as far as the main card, I'm going Muslim Salikhov over Nicolas Dalby. I am going Manuel Torres over Nicolas Motta. I'm going Pat Sabatini over Lucas Almeida. I'm doing Christian Leroy Duncan, potentially a knockout decision, no bet type of bet, but Christian Leroy Duncan over Armen Petrosyan, Arman Tsarukyan to get the finish over Joaquim Silva in the first round, and I am going with Marvin Vettori to get the win over Jared Cannonier. So, those are my picks.
Great picks. I like them a lot. Very similar, which means that we have to bet. We either have to bet all of them or all of them are going to be very, very wrong. But I have a feeling that this is going to be a profitable card for us. So appreciate everybody joining us on this fine Sunday. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Definitely hammer that subscribe button if you're here with us right now and you're not subscribed, please. You could also check us out on Spotify. Spotify is a great place where you can listen if you can't watch. We've also got timestamps in the description of our Spotify and our YouTube. So if you just want to hear about one specific fight, just check out the timestamps. Tom also clips up all of our videos too, just based on which fight. So again, if you just want to hear about a specific fight, going forward in the future, check those out. You can also, leave us a comment, please. We're live streaming, so we want to interact with you. If you have a comment or you have something to say or a question, just let us know in the chat, and we'll definitely respond. Follow us on Twitter. We're at _pickinwinners on Twitter and Instagram. That's like our whole team over there. And then as well as at Pickin' Fights on Instagram. I'm at Pickin' Keith on Twitter. Tom is at Pickin' Fights Tom. So you can follow us over there. What else am I forgetting, Tom? menoforder.com. Yep. Breakdowns on menoforder.com as well. We do a lot of great content with them over there. It is Strong Dad June. We're celebrating Strong Dads this June over at menoforder.com. So check out what they're doing over there, what we do over there. A lot of great content coming from Men of Order. Other than that, Tom, am I forgetting anything else?
No, just hope everyone has a good week and enjoy the fights next weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Enjoy. Have a great week. Thanks, Tom. Thank you, everybody at home.